All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the September meeting of the Finance, Efficiency, Economy, and Sustainability Subcommittee meeting. I'm Bill Gates. I chair this subcommittee, and we're going to start this meeting like we always start the meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Mayor Valenzuela, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The members of the subcommittee have been provided with the minutes from the June 17th, 2015 meeting. Do I have any comments or would entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
All right, motion to approve, second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Items 3 and 4 on our agenda are for information only. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Yes, Councilman Waring. On item 3?
Yes, item 3. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm looking for the page. I don't know who I'm directing my question to. Thank you. It's just Ed, or?
You can direct it to me, and I think Jeff Barton, our Budget and Research Director, is here too.
So on page 20 of the packet, which is page 2 of the report, maybe 6 months ago, I think, Ed, you and I have talked about this. There was an article in one of the Tucson papers that talked about population growth in Arizona, that Tucson and the surrounding areas weren't necessarily, surrounding Maricopa County, weren't really growing dramatically. That Maricopa County was, but on the new multifamily units permitted slide and the new home construction permits issued slide, again, both on page 2 of the report, it talks about low population growth, consistent with projections of low population growth, consistent with economic projections of low population growth. How do we reconcile those two things? If Maricopa County, according to one report, is growing at a rate almost akin to what we saw a decade ago, how come our own report is saying something that seems like different?
That's a great question.
And if you don't know,
I don't think we know. I know
Okay.
Particularly, or Jeff does, but we'll go back and look at that.
Okay, it just seems like those two things can't be true at the same
Sure.
time. So, we are having population growth. I was surprised at the Tucson article, which was maybe 6 months or so ago, saying it was really rip-roaring in Maricopa County, and I think particularly Phoenix, when, at the same time, we don't seem to be experiencing that. So I don't...
We'll check with that. We'll talk to our
Or if you come tell me.
We'll talk to our University of Arizona economists that we consult with and ask them that specific question.
I want to make sure we're looking at the right things, too. And
Nope, thank you for that.
thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments? I want to thank the Budget and Research team for putting this report together. I think this is very helpful information, and I particularly like that we're comparing these numbers with the peak year. And although, Councilman Waring has mentioned some of the kind of negative data in here, there's also a lot of positive data in here showing that on a number of indices, we're actually at our high point, the highest we've ever been as it relates to number of passengers at Sky Harbor Airport, as it relates to collection of sales tax revenue, restaurants and bars, and even tonnage of garbage that we're picking up, which, sounds like kind of a mundane item, but actually it's a positive. So there's a lot of information here, but we like the positive and the negative because I think for us as policymakers, it gives us a little more perspective on what is going on.
And I was not emphasizing the negative, as I'm so wont to do. I was actually just noticing a discrepancy in information I had been provided.
Yeah,
So,
it was a great question. I didn't mean to suggest you're being
I know
negative.
I'm negative, Bill. I can take it. It's okay. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to, get to the bottom of the thing.
There you go.
Understand why my negativity is so prevalent.
Well, great. Any other comments? Yes, Councilman Nowakowski.
And Mr. Chair, I agree with you. If you look at all these great numbers, Phoenix is on the up. Even our value of our property has jumped by 19%. This is great information. If you have a chance, I think this is on the internet, right? On the website. So I really encourage individuals to really look at it. It talks about city taxes. Many people talk about phasing out the food tax, that it was going to affect the city of Phoenix. Matter of fact, we actually went up instead of going down in our sales tax. And, this subcommittee was actually created after the food tax the emergency food tax was implemented, and that $100 million savings was really a big impact on that whole sales tax and making sure that the facilities and the services that we provide, we continue to provide that for all. So really want to thank all those individuals that worked really hard to put these numbers together, because it's really a good story for the city of Phoenix.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Nowakowski. This really grew out of conversations at the subcommittee meeting, and as you noted, it is posted online at phoenix.gov/budget. There's a prominent place on the budget page of phoenix.gov for people to see this every month.
Great.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. With that, unless we have any comments on number 4, then we'll move to our first discussion and action item, which is item number 5. And this is the authorization to enter into development agreements between the City of Phoenix and W.L. Gore. Ms. Mackey, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman and Council. We're here today to talk to you about an exciting new development in North Phoenix, which includes the expansion of future expansion of a great Phoenix employer. W.L. Gore, as you know, is located north on I-17 and opened its Phoenix operations in 2011. They employ approximately 750 people in the city of Phoenix currently, but about 2,500 in all of Arizona, with one of their larger operations being in Flagstaff. They intend to purchase approximately 41 acres to the north of their existing site in order to be able to expand their operations in the future. I think it's very important to note this does not replace their existing site. This is a planned expansion for future growth. In front of you, you see the site that they plan to acquire. This would be Gore on the, if you're looking at your screen, it'd be the left side of the screen where you see the preliminary site plan, kind of the conceptual site plan that's built out on that site, and would be located at I-17 and Dove Valley. So John C. Lincoln would be just to the west of this property, and then this is off of Dove Valley and North Valley Parkway. Fry's will be the anchor grocery store of the site. Nice, brand new, and the real estate group from Fry's has assured me it'll be one of their nice new prototypes for the neighborhood. And then in the future, although no plans today, a multifamily development site. The site is owned by Canyon Crossroads today. It is approximately 100 total acres, with what Gore is intending to purchase at approximately 41 acres. As we talked about, at estimated build-out, Gore intends to create approximately 1,200 new jobs. It's the model they showed today, but as they go through that growth, they'll really determine what those new jobs will look like. And at ultimate build-out, you'll see nearly 700,000 square feet on that campus. I think one of the most important things to note of this is not to set a false expectation. This is future planning for Gore. So they still have buildings to build out on their existing campus and development on their existing campus. But this really shows their commitment to the future here in Phoenix. I think what we'll see build first on this site will be Fry's, and if I'm not mistaken, they'll more than likely be under construction in the next 30 to 45 days. So lots of new things. Their planned opening is for the early spring of 2016. As we look at our proposed terms of the development agreement we'd like council to consider today, they are a relatively simple terms. One is on the zoning side. Since Gore's not ready to develop quite yet today, we would provide them a zoning verification letter to assure them that their zoning is in place and that they have certainties of being able to develop in the future. And that would be that's being provided to them by our Planning and Development Department Director. On our public infrastructure, they would build and dedicate 31st Avenue as a public road. And for you, that would be this road that's located right here. So they would build and develop that road at no cost to the city and dedicate it to the city as a public street. Once the warrants are in place, they would ask us to construct a traffic signal at this location, which is 27th Drive, and there would be a 25% buy-in back to the multifamily developer. I'm sorry, a 25% buy-in from the multifamily developer in the future to the city. And then the city, at its discretion, would put both traffic signals in. The other would be at 31st Avenue, where we just talked about, and that would be at warrant demands by our street department, determines by Gore and created by those 1,200 new jobs that come in. We would agree that they will not be required to construct a bridge on their own crossing Skunk Creek, but they will. They may end up paying impact fees depending on the permits and depending on how things work. They would pay towards the construction of that bridge, as would Fry's, as would the multifamily, and as would all the other developments within that area. We would agree to accept at no cost 21 acres, plus or minus 21 acres in the Skunk Creek area. That's just to the west of the Gore development that you see there today. It is part of our Trails Master Plan, and they would be dedicating that at close of property to the city, and Parks is in agreement that they would accept that, and in the future may or may not turn that into part of our trails. On the interim, we would provide to Gore, Canyon Crossroads, and Macerich an easement, to Gore for maintaining their retaining walls and their property, and to Macerich and Canyon Crossroads for cattle grazing rights that exist there today until development happens in the future. As we look at maintenance, Gore and Canyon Crossroads have agreed to maintain the public right-of-way adjacent to their property. So they will be handling all of the streets landscaping and maintenance along that area. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have on this new development.
Thank you. Councilman Waring.
This is in District 2 and it's good.
All right.
See?
Positive.
Trying to go against type, at least for this item. No, this is seriously, this is excellent. We're thrilled with Gore as a resident, if you will, in the district, and an expansion is great, and the Fry's and everything else you talked about. They kept me fully informed, and I appreciate that, and I think this is exciting for that area of the city.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilman Nowakowski.
You know, this summer I took my kids out to Wet and Wild out there, and it's just amazing the growth out in your district, council member, and just really want to thank you for all the amenities that are out there. I know that people were talking about how it used to be out in the middle of nowhere. Now we have grocery stores, we have activities for families to go to. So really, thank you for your leadership out there and the future 1,200 jobs. Wow, incredible. So thank you. And thanks to our staff for all their hard work. And people are always saying that you always are working in downtown Phoenix, but this is a fine example that it's really the whole city of Phoenix, not just the downtown area.
Certainly is. All of Phoenix is hot.
Right.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chris Mackey, for finally getting Jim Waring to say this is good.
Yes.
Leave it to Chris Mackey. Congratulations, Councilman Waring. This is good. This is good for the entire city of Phoenix, and what a great partnership. Immediately coming out as a stakeholder, especially with the public road, as an example, as a stakeholder, and saying this is going to be our community as well. And so, Chris, congratulations to you. I know that this has been a lot of work for you, and the focus is on the entire city. And what's good for District 2 is good for downtown Phoenix and the rest of the city, and vice versa. What's good for downtown is good for District 2 and 5 and 7-3 and so on. But this is definitely an example that will help move our city forward, regardless of where you live in the city. So that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just echo what all of my colleagues have said. Great work, Chris. Excited about this, and it's W.L. Gore is a wonderful employer. These are absolutely, we talk a lot about trying to attract new businesses and new companies, but this is one that's existing here, and seeing them build and grow is a wonderful thing. Plus the Fry's, that's something that Councilman Waring and I were talking about. They've been looking for that, needing that amenity, and there's also a Fry's at the northern end of District 3 on Bell Road that probably will have a lot of District 2 residents will be coming to as well. So it's great to see that kind of investment coming right now. I think that's a great sign for the entire city, like the Vice Mayor said. So with that, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Councilman Waring. And that takes us to item 6, which is COBRA and Flexible Spending Account Administration Services Contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mary Kyle, our Assistant HR Director, who is our benefit expert, is here. This subcommittee's talked a lot about these items, and this is furthering the direction from the subcommittee and the council with just an implementation. Mary?
Thank you. So today I'm here to talk to you about a couple recent RFPs that we've conducted in HR. So 2 that we combined together are our COBRA and FSA administration services. So just to kind of bring you up to speed, COBRA provides for temporary continuation of group health insurance coverage for people that might be losing coverage for a variety of reasons. Currently, we administer that program through city staff here at the City of Phoenix, and annually we have anywhere from 350 to 400 enrollments in our COBRA program at any time. And then our flexible spending account program, that is also known as FlexWrap here at the City of Phoenix. And what this allows for is employees to set aside pre-tax dollars to pay for qualified health care expenses as well as dependent care expenses. So by setting away that money on a pre-tax basis, then they're paying for those services really at a discount. We have had our flexible spending account program outsourced for the last year. We've used a company called AssyFlex, and we've used a cooperative contract with Pima County for that one. Currently, we have about 1,900 participants enrolled in the healthcare flexible spending and about 300 that are enrolled in the dependent care for 2015. So by providing outsourced services for this, in the COBRA administration, there's lots of compliance things that we have to do with regard to notification to participants that are eligible for COBRA, and outsourcing this would really go to a company that's very focused on this. This is what they do as a business, and so it would provide full life cycle compliance. Our participants would have online access to their COBRA account, be able to pay things online or through a check system through that outsourced vendor. And again, the compliance for us is key on that one. For continuing the outsourced flexible spending account program, that allows for quicker turnaround for our employees. Typically, when we did that in the past, it ran on a payroll cycle, so it could take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on when a claim was submitted, for an employee to get reimbursement. By using an outsourced vendor, they process claims every single day, so claims are processed in a much quicker process than we can do it. Also, employees are offered a debit card if they want to use that functionality, so that just provides some ease in administration of utilizing those flexible spending dollars. It also provides improved security of confidential information. So we're no longer the ones that are reviewing, documents and those kinds of things that are coming in on the healthcare spending side of things. And there's multiple claim filing options. So again, you can use that debit card function. You could submit claims electronically, so it makes it just a much easier process for members. So we did a combined RFP for COBRA and FSA administration in July of this year. We had 6 vendors who responded. We invited 2 finalists back for finalist interviews, and we're recommending AssyFlex as the vendor for both outsourced COBRA administration as well as the flexible spending. So they've offered us a 5-year pricing guarantee with very competitive pricing. They have strong customer service skills, the ability, again, to take claims in multiple different ways, as well as some online tracking and those kinds of things. They offer a highly qualified team of people that would service our account, and they have public sector and city-specific experience. So we're asking for a recommendation today from the subcommittee to get the contract with AssyFlex through for both COBRA and FSA. The annual cost for this is $117,000 per year, not to exceed $585,000 over the term of the contract, and funding is available in the Healthcare Benefits Trust. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions, Councilman?
So what
Councilman
kind of,
Nowakowski.
Thank you, Chairman. What kind of savings for the City of Phoenix if we outsource this?
There really isn't a savings for the city other than more of an efficiency measure, to tell you the truth. Financially, there's no savings for us. But when you think about you're going to a vendor that this is their sole focus in doing COBRA and outsource flexible spending, you know, from a compliance standpoint, that is what they do every single day, where staff that I have in the benefits office does the full gamut of benefits. So we do eligibility and enrollment and long-term disability and life insurance and dental and medical. So we're really spread out amongst all of benefits, where having an outsourced vendor, this is their sole focus.
Okay, and then one of the things that I noticed about customer service and providing better services to our employees was were the employee union groups involved with this in any way, or?
They have been. So they were part of the selection process. So they evaluated those 6 RFPs that came in, both when we looked at an outsourced option over a year ago, and then as part of this RFP process, they were part of that selection committee as well and sat in on those vendor interviews for the finalists as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments?
I just have a
Yes,
question.
Vice Mayor.
So we currently do not outsource COBRA?
Not right now. We do not. No, this would be the first time that we outsource COBRA.
And I would just, my first question, and it was already asked, we're talking about our city employees. There's been a great relationship between labor management, and you're telling me that that the employee groups had an opportunity to weigh in and have reviewed these things. And so I'm assuming that this coming before us, that box, if you will, has been checked, and you're asking this subcommittee to approve
That is a
to the
correct
next level.
statement, yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments or questions? I would entertain a motion then.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second, and this is going to the full council, and this is one that I need to continue to keep an eye on. This is important for all of us.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I oppose it.
All right. By 3-1 vote, motion passes. Thank you. Takes us on now to item 7, which is the strategic goal setting consultant contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was an item that was continued from the formal meeting last week to the September 30 formal, with the direction to come to this committee for a further discussion. Tony Macarone in my office and Jim Campion, our procurement officer, conducted a procurement for the consultant, and they are here to answer any questions on that. But with that, I would just turn over to you if you had any questions or opening statements, and then we can say a little bit more.
Perfect. No, I appreciate this item coming back to the subcommittee. We heard this, we had a discussion of this, I think it was earlier this year, the possibility of doing a strategic plan as a city council. Since I've been on the council, we have not done this. You know, most companies out there in the private sector have strategic plans, 5-year strategic plan, or whatever the case may be. And I think it's a very good exercise to go through, and I think it can provide a guidance to those who are in management. The city of Phoenix, the voters of the city of Phoenix just approved the general plan overwhelmingly. And if you go through this document, you'll see that there were a lot of issues and specifically core values that the voters have said, you know, they want us to be working on as a city. But there's a lot here. And so I, for one, think that it would be a very good exercise for us to try and take this and kind of boil it down into a couple of pages of clear direction that could be provided to the city manager and his team as we go forward and see what things are most important. But again, to me, this document is the foundation of everything. This is what's been approved by the voters, and that's certainly what I would like to see this exercise be made up of moving forward. But with that, any comments or questions from my colleagues? Councilman Waring.
So we did have a discussion about this at the council meeting, I guess last week, and it got sent back here. You know, the way I remembered sort of this exercise evolving was one or more council members talked about more sort of prioritizing what we're doing, which is, that's the way I remember this being the genesis of what we're doing here now. I voted against the general plan, so I have maybe a different take on it than others, but I guess I don't see that. I mean, it's 300 pages or whatever it is. I think that was right, but whatever is there, I don't see that as really a strategic plan. I agree with Councilman Gates. I think what we're talking about is more sort of, here's a list of the things we do that are in our budget. You know, we'd like to do all the stuff, but obviously we're not all going to do it tomorrow. And, you know, we've got to prioritize. And I thought that's what we were talking about. I think the conversation last week, maybe there was some disagreement about that, I guess is the way I'll put it. So I guess I'm curious what my colleagues would say about interpreting what it is we think we're going to get out of this, because it is, what, 70 grand or something we're talking about spending.
It's 58,000.
58,000. You know, $58,000 maybe could be better spent, but I'm not really sure we really have done it, as was suggested at the meeting last week, by putting that on the ballot and having voters vote for it. So I guess I agree with Councilman Gates, but I'm curious what others have to say about what we're planning on getting out of this.
Councilor Nowakowski. Sorry. Councilor Nowakowski.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make sure that we're spending tax dollars wisely. And one of the concerns I have is about 4 or 5 years ago, back then, City Manager David Cavazos actually did a strategic planning for each of our departments, where basically they came out with a mission and vision and for each of their departments. And after that report was done, it was just kind of put on the shelf and it was just there. What I'm concerned about is that if we're going to spend $58,000 or $60,000 or close to that, that there's some type of an operational planning process on an annual basis for each department. We end up looking at a budget that's probably so high, and to go through it all, I mean, it would take you at least a month or so to go into detail. What I like to see is each department come up with some type of an operational planning where they're going to be focusing on 2 to 3 items that year and basically explain to us their budget and what their cuts are, instead of just going in there saying, hey, each department cut 10, 20%. I think we need to do it strategically. And also, I'd like to see some type of matrix to meet those goals on an annual basis. Not just reporting their monthly budgets to us as subcommittee members or council members, but also creating some type of a matrix that the deputy city managers that overseeing that department and the managers themselves can actually grade or make sure that these individuals are meeting that matrix, and there's some type of measuring tool that we manage by results instead of just on an annual basis. It comes back to us, and then we have these budget hearings, and then the community gets involved, and it's some group is into a certain issue, so then they fill the auditorium, and then we're concerned about that one issue. I don't think that's strategic at all. I think I like to see each department come up with some type of a annual operational planning. And the other concern I have was that it become transparent. Mayor Greg Stanton has put all of our council meetings, our formal meetings, our policy meetings, and our subcommittee meetings on Channel 11. So it's very transparent. So I want to make sure that this whole process is very transparent, that it's not just a recommendation coming from the council and there's no ownership of it, that if we're going to be out there making some suggestions, or individuals are out there making suggestions, that we take ownership of it and that people know where those suggestions are coming from. So those were some of the concerns, and that's why I wanted to bring it to this body to really vent those concerns out and try to work those out and to make sure that this investment of $58,000 is a wise investment, and it's something that's going to actually have some kind of ROI in the future for us.
Councilman Gates, Councilman Nowakowski. So I think those comments are right on and go to what this is. So in my evaluation last year, the council asked me to review the possibility of getting to a strategic plan, strategic goal setting, And so that's why these folks have gone through a procurement process. But really what you mentioned was the strategic planning effort of departments about 5 years ago. You're right. That had about 10 strategic areas that departments worked from. What this would do, I think, as Councilman Gates said, it would build from the general plan Phoenix. I think it'd also be informed by those 10 areas that staff had done, but it would be direction from the council to us so that we could go and do the operational planning as you suggested. I can have staff do that without doing this. I could direct staff to go and do operational plans for departments, and we can do that. I think it would be helpful to staff to understand that is flowing from some direction from council, and so we would use that. But if the council didn't approve it, we could do it anyway. But having the direction from council, of course, is always helpful. And then we can have those operational plans, as you suggested, that talk about what, on a department by department basis, how they're lining up with those stated objectives.
I like to see it become a living document. It's not just a document that we put on a bookshelf and it looks pretty and we have a nice little meeting about it, but it's something that's ongoing, and it's basically changes the culture of the city of Phoenix and how we operate and how we actually manage our budgets in each department.
The second thing I was just going to say is these meetings with where the council does this would need to be an open session. They're not executive session. They would be open, probably in a work study or policy type of setting, however the council would do that. And the consultant would be there and work through it. It would be an open process. If the council wanted to be on TV, we would do that. But they would be posted open to the public meetings.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Bless you. I want to support this. I know Councilwoman Pastor is who really wants to try to lead this effort, and I think I can understand the perspective, and I am supportive. We have to remember, and I appreciate what you said, Ed. There is a charter system in place for a reason, and you do have the ability to ask staff to come up with some of these priorities based on the direction of the council, and it'd be kind of nice, as you just said, to get the direction from the council. And I think the council has to understand that, frankly, if you want to keep flowing up, well, we need to continue to get the direction from the people of Phoenix. So I'm a big supporter of the public process. It's not a box that simply gets checked. We should be governing based on the public process, public input. The Plan Phoenix document that was just overwhelmingly supported and passed just 3 weeks ago yesterday, I believe it is a living document. Otherwise, people wouldn't be so passionate about it. And frankly, we have a lot of plans around that. I think it's good to become more efficient. It's good to drill down and to figure out how we get some of these things accomplished. So I'm in support of this with the understanding that this is completely transparent, and as transparent as this particular subcommittee or a policy session or whatever. And I would be supportive if these are meetings in public where the public are free to view. Just these meetings are archived like the rest of our meetings are. They're viewed to go back and watch when they get off of work or school or weekends or whatever they like to do. And of course, they're free to be in the meeting and weigh in. So if that's what we're talking about here, then I think it's definitely a good idea. As the council, as staff is given an opportunity to really drill down, and staff has been doing amazing things. I mean, we have an amazing city, undoubtedly, because of the 14,000 plus city employees that come to work every day in the various job roles that you have. So staff is looking for that direction. It's going to be good for the council to come together and to really drill down and open that Plan Phoenix book up and really drill down and figure out where the priorities are. But more importantly, it gives the public an opportunity to really drill down and get into the nuts and bolts if that's what we're talking about, so that communication continues to flow from the public to the council and of course our city manager and team. So if that is the motion, and if that's what we're going to be sending back, I would support that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Waring?
So I do remember Councilman Pastor at least once bringing this up at a council meeting. I just remember us discussing it with you. I don't remember at the time anybody saying we don't need to do that because we're working on the general plan, Plan Phoenix, so we don't need to do this. Has something changed, or is this general plan, Plan Phoenix, different than previous iterations, discussions of which I was not part of, or?
I think, if you're done, yeah, I'd be happy to take a shot at that. I think that there is, when you read through Plan Phoenix, there is a lot of discussion about what our priorities ought to be. Some of the, and there are metrics in here, which I think is a good thing, but they're getting at a very, granular level. And so there's a lot of strategic thinking going on where we ought to go as a city. It's just to, I guess, respond to your comment. It is really at a granular level. And for me, what I see this being, I love the metrics that are in here, and I would love us at a 30,000-foot level to have some, to find out at least if this council can agree on some metrics that, hey, if we hit this number in whatever the thing may be, whether it's the satisfaction of our residents, whether there are certain, let's say environmental sustainability goals that we could all agree upon, I think that would be a great thing for us to make that statement as a body and then to give that direction to Ed and his team. But, in my opinion, this document is not a high-level strategic plan. It is a rather specific. I mean, it gets into a lot of specifics, which is great. But I think that's where some of the concern might be coming from. And I'm sensitive to that concern that we not, go out with this document, get it approved by the citizens, and then throw it away. That's not my intent. Regardless of where we may have been, whether we voted for it, this document has been approved. And so I guess my view, and I think some of what the mayor's been trying to articulate and has been articulating, is that we not, if we do go in this direction for the strategic plan, that we don't forget this thing, because this can really inform it. But it's not, in my mind, it's not a high-level strategic plan per se. It gets into great detail, which is a wonderful thing, and can actually be used by many of the departments on a department level.
Well, and she's not here, so I don't want to speak for Councilwoman Pastor. I believe the genesis of her comments, as I remember them, were concerns during a budget discussion for next year that we were going to be short of money, and she wanted to basically prioritize. And maybe that's different than, I would argue, there's an old saying in politics or whatever, your budget kind of is your, if you're not funding it but you're all for it, who cares? Yeah. If you're not paying for more police officers but you say police officers are a big thing, well then, at some point the rubber hits the road, and I think that's what she was getting at. At least I thought it was, which may be different than the Plan Phoenix book you have there. But I just want to make sure we get something, I guess to Councilman Nowakowski's point, something useful out of this, that we're actually going to address issues. To my mind, what I thought I would get out of it is sort of an advanced organizer, how we're going to deal with our financial troubles going forward. We're picking this, not this, because we said we value this over this. So I hope that's what we're going to get out of it. I guess I don't know. I'm not sure from what I've heard just in the discussion last week, when it was a couple other members who aren't here who were kind of going back and forth. Right. I stayed, contrary to form, I stayed sort of silent in that because they've been around a lot longer. They've gone through this. They've used general plans much longer. And it was an interesting discussion, so they sent it back here. I'm just not sure what I hear is everybody being on the same page of what we expect to get out of this.
Councilman Nowakowski.
And just to address the transparency issue, is that I believe we're going to go into a crucial situation next year where we might be in a deficit and we're going to have to make some hard decisions. So I want to make sure that individuals are involved with this process. So how do you make sure that, or what's the input of this document? And is it the council members coming together, giving you the input? Is it different department heads coming in? Is it employees coming in, prioritizing which departments' services are are priority and which ones are lower and higher and all that. Because when you sit down, it depends on the makeup of that team that you're gathering that data and information from, that the whole strategic plan is based on. So I'm very concerned if it's us as council members that aren't involved on the daily operations. For us, some of us might say, hey, outsource some of these departments make a lot of sense. But then when you turn around and you talk to some of the employees, they're trying to turn around and say, you know what, if you outsource it, it might cost us even more so. So insourcing is the best way. So I think I want to make sure that if we're going to be making some crucial decisions in the future, that we have input from all levels, and it's not just from us that kind of look at it at that 40,000 foot level, but we actually have individuals that are hands-on and deal with the situation on a daily basis.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, just to sort of build from that, I think generally these processes as they occur in other governments, there's two pieces of them. One is the product and the second is the process. So the product becomes sort of the agreed upon thinking of a governing body for the kinds of things that are envisioned for the year. The general plan is a much longer range view. This generally has a 1 to 2 year horizon and for some goals. So for example, if the council says, as it has consistently, that public safety is a top priority, okay, let's put a little bit of meat to that. So what kind of indicators are important to the council about that? Is it crime rate? Is it calls for service? What kinds of things do you want to see us measure with that? It won't be as specific as to say when we get to a budget, well, the city manager's office ranks below the city clerk department because the council said something. It doesn't get to that level. That still is the budget process as we have it, which is open, has public hearings, lots of people giving input. You guys hear from lots of folks. This is a step above that, I think, and doesn't get to that. But ultimately, it really is the council's. You take input from a lot of people, but ultimately, the document, the product, the process is the council's product and process, not the staff's, not directly the community. It's where you all are feeding that information that you've received from all the sources you do every day, every weekend when you're out there knocking on doors and attending events. So
and then the second, the follow-up question would be, so we're going to take ownership as a council. So our priority is going to be public safety. I mean, it's everyone's priority. But then if we have to fund that, if we say, hey, our priority is to hire 600 more police officers, so is there a portion to the strategic plan of the funding portion of it? Because all my colleagues are going to say public safety is important. We all believe that. But at the same time, when it comes to fund it, and if it comes out to be some type of I'm just throwing it out there, it's not like a food tax to support this, then you're going to have the council split on it. So how do you support, is there going to be a measurement of supporting our recommendations also? Because I don't want to be put in a situation where we come up with all these great ideas, but at the same time, there's not a support system or a funding system to support those great ideas.
If I could take it just a little different tact on that same thing, you're right. I mean, the tax increase issue would be one issue. But I would also say some of us have made comments in the past at budget meetings about, we could cut this and add the number of police officers. And I was kind of hoping, there might be some sort of where everybody stands on maybe not each individual line item, but sort of big groupings of things, police, fire, parks, some of the traditional things we do. You guys during the budget hearings give us sort of rank orders of how much stuff is and so forth, and just sort of rank it a little bit. Now, that might not be politically advisable, but frankly, it might be illustrative of how if we've all got something ranked 28th and it's not really a core function and we could cut it and hire a few more officers, then maybe we ought to do that. But we never really have those discussions during the budget here. It always seems to go kind of fast. It's also, people come to the hearings and either say you can't cut anything or we want you to add X, Y, and Z, which is what it's been the last couple of years, and then I guess last year, and then The year prior, it was don't cut anything. And that just skewed. This would be a chance to me. I thought that's what Councilwoman Pastor was getting at. Again, don't want to speak with her. That's why I remember her comments, though, in context, is that we would have this discussion now, a few months before we start really having budget hearings and so forth. It would still all be public. It would still all be transparent. And we could kind of see, is there any common ground for either getting rid of stuff to do more of stuff we all agree we really like, or what? If we're not going to do that, and it's going to be some document, as Councilman Nowakowski said, that just sits on a shelf, then let's save the 58 grand and spend that money hiring another officer. That's what I'm trying to get at, is kind of what people's expectations are. I still hear some differences, not that anybody's wrong. It's just might be a more interesting discussion next week when there are 9 of us instead of 4 of us. So.
I would say in response to that I mean, my intent and my hope is that this will be a real document that gives real direction as to what our priorities are, and like I said, metrics. I think that's extremely important. Yeah, I agree. If this is going to sit on the shelf,
hopefully next year's budget would reflect.
And to your point, and to your point, again, in my experience from the private sector, the reason you do one of the main reasons you do a strategic plan is to inform your budget. It's based upon that. Okay, we know what's important, and now we know what ought to be in our budget. So I agree, and what that looks like exactly. I know there's been ranking that's been done in the past at the city council. I don't know if it's that or if it's broader type of concepts that we want to have X number of officers by a certain time, or like Ed said, we want to have crime rate at a certain level. Well, then from that we have to figure out how we want to get there. But right now, as a body, although there was this sort of department and staff-driven strategic plan a few years ago, we've never done that as long as I've been on the council. We haven't done a strategic plan exercise as a council. And by the way, I agree with all the comments that have been made about transparency. This needs to be done transparently. I think many years ago, this process may have been done in e-session. I don't think anyone here is advocating that.
And just if I may interject, I'm not implying either here or at the meeting last week, anybody was saying anything else. I think everybody was sort of like, this is going to be out there, regular meeting or special meetings or whatever, but still be broadcast probably. And so just want to make sure I'm not impugning anybody's
maybe I can maybe give it an example. So just from others I've seen. So if public safety were one and the council decided what we really want to focus on is response time. That's what people care about. When I call, how quickly does a police officer or a firefighter show up, as opposed to maybe crime rates. And so then what staff would do would be come back and say, okay, if we want to get our response time to some level, it would take this amount of resources and additional to do that. At the same time, there might be a strategic goal that says, of course, fiscal responsibility, and we want to ensure we have a cash reserve of so much money. Well, then then you're going to have decisions to make between those two strategic goals, right? So where does paying for response time lowering fit versus the amount of cash we have in reserve? We can't do both. How do we want to do it? So it's not necessarily going to say it's absolutely like a computer where you click in and it tells us to do these 6 things in this order. But you've had the conversation where you understand together, we would like to do something on public safety. We also value financial responsibility. And now we got to sort of make those work together as they can. It gives you the basis for that conversation. Maybe more than just not having any sort of idea about, I don't know if I want response time or crime rate or what. So it can help do that if that helps sort of identify some of the things that come out. I don't think it's as easy as there's a list of checklists that we hit. It's more of how are we going to evaluate things against each other. I think that's what Councilman Nowakowski was talking about.
So I have a response to that. Thanks, if you don't mind, Michael. Thank you. So I guess I would say to that, one of my frustrations with our budget process is we treat every dollar like it's equal. Like citizens, the bang for the buck, hiring a police officer, $1 spent towards hiring a police officer is the same benefit to the city, individual citizen, as paying our dues to the League of Cities and Towns. I find that absurd, and so that's been a little bit. That's my sort of push for a ranking. I understand what you're saying. But it also implies we're never going to cut anything. Everything we do is just top notch and needs to be done. And I would dispute that and have disputed that at budget meetings in the past. which is why I was sort of heartened when I heard Councilman Pastor. Again, what I thought was sort of, let's just look at everything we're doing, see if we have to keep doing it. What maybe we could do differently, maybe we could outsource, maybe we could do it cheaper. When it's not just on the fly lumped in with $1.2 billion worth of stuff and public pressure and so forth. We'll still get public pressure, the meetings will still be public, but we don't have to make a decision right away. We can think about it, take some more time. It's a little more isolated. I thought that was a very good idea, particularly since there are some budget clouds on the horizon, since we're still getting monsoons. I guess I'll use that analogy. You can kind of see them coming. If not next year, maybe we'll pull something off, but down the road with this pension issue. So that's what I was kind of looking to get. Is there some stuff we can the herd be winnowed in terms of number of things that we're doing?
So I think it's really important to note this is not a program ranking process. That is a separate thing that the council could choose to do. It was attempted 10 or 12 years ago, and it didn't, for lots of reasons, it never took hold and worked. So you guys will have to speak to that more than me. But so a ranking process of programs, like we have, I don't know, Jeff, 400 discrete programs in our zero-based budget. That is a process that is not a strategic planning effort. That's more of a budgeting exercise that can be done. This process is not designed to do something at that level.
Which
it's
is why
more to give you well, I would just say, and
go ahead.
I'll be quiet. It'd be more just to give you the context. If you wanted to do a ranking, it would give a context for the ranking, perhaps, if that's what people wanted. But the ranking is really a budget exercise that the council could direct us to do, as opposed to what this is a little broader.
And so and then I'll turn over to my colleagues, but that in that ranking exercise that you're talking about, if you don't have, in my opinion, if you don't have a strategic plan, you're doing that in a vacuum. What a plan does is we said in our plan, these 3 or 4 things are most important. So it helps you to make those decisions on individual programs, I would argue.
I respond to that. So I would argue what I heard, when I heard what not just Laura but others said as this request, if the word ranking wasn't used, I did think what you just described was kind of what people were asking for. That's the way I heard it. Maybe that's just because what I wanted to hear. I acknowledge that people hear what they want to hear. So maybe that's the case. As far as whether we the strategic plan, the way she presented it, I'm talking only about the council meeting that I remember it being discussed. I definitely thought it was something that I just described, which is really what you just described. Whatever you want to call it, is something immaterial that we're going to do. We're going to have some guidance and go through this before the budget process. It was all geared towards looming budget problems. It was not necessarily some big overarching plan. It was dealing with upcoming budget problems specifically. And so I'll just leave it at that. That's, again, why we can debate next week, I guess, or whenever, about what we actually expect to come out of this.
Vice Mayor, thank you for your patience.
Of course. This is it's becoming even more and more exciting, I think. I like the idea that this is, if we do this, and obviously this has to go to the full council, that this would be transparent. It gives us a chance to really figure out what the real priorities are. But what I really appreciate about this, and we have to be sure that this is part of it, is the education behind it. I love the idea of what does this membership really mean, or what does this office, what does it really mean to have a public affairs office? We can't just look at the budget of the office as a cost. It's an investment. There's a reason we have it in the first place. Public Works is doing some amazing things with ASU that we're discussing. I'm talking about the incubator that's coming up. Could we look at that as a bottom line cost? I guess we could, but we're missing the mark on that. We're missing the vision. It's called an investment. We have to do more than just cut our way out of a deficit every time a deficit comes up. We have to grow our way out of this deficit. We have to, and I'll use an example that really went to the public. Again, 3 weeks ago, Proposition 104 passing. Is that a cost? It depends on how you look at it. People of Phoenix view and these need to be. And I think every one of my colleagues, and it was already mentioned, I think everyone agrees with that. But the education that comes with all of these items is incredibly important, and it'll allow us to make those decisions based on all of the information, not half the information. And of course, it'll give the public an opportunity to truly weigh in as well.
Thank you. I just had my childhood flash in front of me with the officer friendly and stop, drop, and roll, so I'm a little thrown off right now. No, those are great comments. Councilman Waring.
So I completely agree with the comments at the beginning about education. There's one thing we just don't do here like they did at the legislature. Every time I mention the legislature here, I figure you guys are glowering. Maybe not you, Bill, but generally speaking. But one thing that they had was the Appropriations Committee, where you literally went through from the Attorney General and the Secretary of State to programs most of you probably never even heard of. They would have to come in and make a presentation every year, not necessarily a pitch for why they're important, but you got to ask whatever questions you wanted. The meetings went forever. I mean, I did it for 6 years, and I was definitely knowledgeable at the end of that. But you had guys like Bob Burns doing it for 20 years. I mean, they knew programs that most of the public never even heard of backwards and forwards. And it was a very, I'm not saying it was concise at all, because it was extremely long, at least once a week, usually more than that. It was a lot of hours sitting and learning about departments and whatever. And we don't really do that here. That hasn't really been the way we've done it. We don't have a budget committee. We don't have kind of an oversight committee like that. I thought that was extremely helpful. I just remember other senators being like, how'd you even know about that committee, or that program? I'd be like, because some of them never been on the Appropriations Committee. I can tell you it was a big difference in knowledge. Here we tend to do it, it's a little more haphazard. Something comes up, and then we learn something in a meeting in our offices, and then maybe that spills over to a council meeting, and then we move on to the next thing. That's why I found kind of our budget process a little bit too. I looked at this as an opportunity to sort of burrow down into, let's take one of the examples about broadcasting the meetings. That's fine. But I guess that begs the question, do we need our own TV studio? How much does that cost us a year? Did we really need to wire this room? Not because I don't want to broadcast these meetings, but we could have walked across the street and had these meetings in that already wired room and been good. Do we really have to have the close-ups like, as I look over the monitor, the close-up is on me now. That's really nice. But wouldn't one camera in the back of the room, which used to be standard for council meetings, and probably not that long ago, it was just audio only, I'm guessing. I know it was at the state. So nobody's saying, it's not a transparency issue. We could have spent a lot less money, still had these meetings out on the web. They maybe wouldn't have looked as pretty. Maybe we wouldn't have a TV studio for doing shows and so forth. But we probably could have saved a boatload of money that could have been spent on officers. Those are the kind of discussions we pretty much never have unless there's some item on the agenda and somebody pulls it, which I'll confess is it's oftentimes me or Pat Vint. Those are the two. We spend a lot more time. Sorry, just kidding. And again, that's kind of a standalone, and then we move on. We don't do it in context. And I do think that's been a little bit of a weakness of our system, so I was hoping that this might address that. So I completely agree about learning more about what it is that we're doing in sort of a more standard format, a little more standalone, rather than having to make a budget decision right then, and not really being able to compare it to something else. So I don't know if that's what will come out of this, but that was my hope anyway.
Thank you. Councilor Nowakowski.
And Councilmember, I agree with you 100%. I mean, we need to learn about every single department, and there's, in the Public Safety Subcommittee, we actually have their monthly reports given to us, and we're able to make sure that they're on target. And if they're not on target, we question that. So there's not a check and balance or some type of managed by results on a city level. So I'm just hoping if we approve this, that it's some type of a operational planning with matrix and some type of benchmarks that are incorporated, that it's ongoing, that we can measure it if it's a monthly basis that we manage by the results of whatever is created from this document, and that it's ongoing. It's not just once a year we get this document, we read about the budget and we approve it. So if it's that, I'd be more open to it. The other thing is I'm totally against prioritizing what's the top, because I mean, we have programs that affect the lower income areas in my district. I mean, the PAC programs, after school programs, that might not affect other council members, and that might be on the low end of the totem pole, but it's that education. I believe through education we'll end poverty, domestic violence, and gang violence, and it's a way out for people. It's a way to break that cycle. And for other areas of the city of Phoenix, there might not be a need for that. So that might be prioritized as something really down low, but those are the services that really changes people's lives and changes the whole face of our city of Phoenix. So I just have some concerns on when we prioritize services, that some districts benefit from different services and others really don't have the need for those services, and those services aren't affected by them.
Great comments. Well, with that, I think it would probably be it's probably time if there is a motion here that someone would like to throw out on the table. And just to be very clear, this is a motion to approve the contract for the goal-setting consultant. Although we've had a great discussion here, I think, of what it is that we view this as being. That is an item here, and I would entertain a motion for the consultant.
I might need a little help with this because there was about 45 minutes of discussion here. So my motion is to approve staff recommendation for the goal-setting consultant. And I have to underscore the importance of having this 100% transparent, like every other public meeting we have here at the City of Phoenix. I think that kind of covers it in a nutshell, right?
I think so. Does that give you the direction you need? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And in that case, and of course we're going to have this discussion across the street as well. In that case, we can discuss whether that's in a policy setting, in a work study or whatever the case might be. To my colleague's point, maybe there's already an efficient way that we can get this done in a setting that we already have, like a policy setting. But I guess that's part of the whole transparency discussion.
Okay.
Oh, he made the motion, right?
Yes. So we have a motion.
Before we vote, can I say something?
Yeah, but actually, can we see if we have a second first?
Sure.
Do we have a second?
See, that's what I wanted.
Okay. So I will second the motion.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second.
Okay. And the reason I was going to say something before is I might be willing to second this. To Councilman Valenzuela's point, we are going to have another discussion about this. I thought he was absolutely right. If after the discussion next week, from what the rest of our colleagues want to get out of this, if it appears we can save $58,000 and we can task Ed to set up meetings about this, then I'm reserving the right to vote no. Frankly, if I think this is going to wind up being another document based on what I'm hearing from colleagues, as Councilman Nowakowski suggested, and it's just going to sit on the shelf, then I'm also, frankly, going to vote no. It's not that I don't think the discussion is important. You heard kind of my concerns and what I would hope to get out of this, but I don't feel like I'm going to get that, or that we could get that without spending extra money. Then I'm down for both of those. The third thing is, based on the discussion that we had last week, from what I heard from at least one of our colleagues, I have not spoken to him about this, but if it sounds like there may be people who vote against this, I'm curious to hear their more fleshed out arguments of why this isn't necessary, related to the general plan and so forth. I'm not pretending to be an expert in all the history of the general plan and so forth, but I'm certainly willing to listen. That would be another reason to frankly vote no. So you already seconded it, so now I don't need to. But so I will vote for it today. But I am definitely reserving the right to change my mind, because I do think there's a lot of open-endedness about what we're all expecting out of this. Mm-hmm. And I am curious to hear what other four colleagues say, frankly, specifically Councilwoman Pastor, because she was the one I think who initially, at least as I recall it, was sort of a driving force of this at council meetings. So,
okay. Any other comments? Yes, Councilor Nowakowski.
And at this time, I can't really support it. I need some questions answered, and probably before a formal meeting, we can have those questions answered. Questions about the transparency, questions about if there's going to be some type of prioritizing, how's that process going to be? How are we going to come up with the prioritizing of those departments and of those services, and also the resources to support that? So would that mean that we would have to take from other departments to support the top priorities of that list? So those are some of the concerns that I have, because I mean, we come up with a great list, and I think we all have some top priorities, but how do you fund that? That's one of my concerns.
All right, good discussion. Any other comments or questions?
I want,
Mayor.
if I can just ask clarification, the top priorities of the, I don't know what we're going to expect. I don't know. I don't think anyone locked us into actually, right now, 1 through 100, what are the priorities of the city of Phoenix? So I don't view this exercise as that.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, I do want to say again, be clear. This is not a program ranking process.
Right.
This is not taking our 400 budgetary programs that we get in a zero-based document and saying 1 through, this is not that. I would just reflect a little bit of this conversation, I think, is sort of where you go. So 2 things that I've heard from this group, if this were the larger group and I were the facilitator, I would say I've heard a desire to have more education about specific programming. So that could be a goal that was set out of this session is, so for the next year, my job as city manager would be to find ways to do more. Really, Councilman Waring sort of explained it, and Councilman Olkowski, do more of that across the council. And then the conversation might be, does the council want to do a budgetary program ranking process? I don't know, but that could be a strategic goal for the year, is to develop a process that does that. So as opposed to actually doing it in this process, a goal might come out to have more education about programs to do or not do ranking. So I think this conversation sort of is a precursor to the kind of thing that might come out, but this process would not be the ranking process.
Okay, I just want to be clear that that's not what we're voting on today, and that's not what I'm personally voting on today. And I think we all, and I won't speak for anyone else, but I also reserve the right to not support this at the full council, depending on where the conversation is and how this is shaping up. Today, I think this is an important conversation to have to move forward, and so I'll stand by my motion.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Waring?
So to that, I mean, as I said, I think, we're clearly not all on the same page necessarily. Maybe we can get there next week. There's certainly a discussion. One thing about the more information about programs, the way the appropriations process worked, it was more, you would ask the department head, whether it was Terry Goddard, the Attorney General, or just a department head, what are you doing and why, was kind of a traditional, and then we go from there. Sometimes people had specific constituents in contact or wherever, but I mean, it was really a good learning process. But part of it was, again, it was all kind of in context. It wasn't like once a month we're going to feature a department. It wasn't so much like that. It was a little more sort of focused, and there was a little more comparison about, okay, we can do this or we can do this. Here's the 2 departments, because we can say all we want all kinds of different things. The budget pie is whatever it is, and particularly if our budget pie it might be a little bit smaller next year. It might not. Maybe it'll be the same, but that definitely impacts it. I just think we should have that discussion. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of next week. But yeah, I definitely agree. We're a ways away from agreement about that. We can agree. We haven't decided to agree.
You got it. Okay, great. Unless we have anything else, then we do have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No, I feel like Jim Waring.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I was gonna say,
All right.
see? It's like Bizarro fees subcommittee.
All right, motion passes 3-1. Next item, item 8, is the citywide office space study results and recommendations.
So this is Chairman Gates. This has been an ongoing effort of this subcommittee to review facilities and properties owned by the city. Tony Macarone, assistant in the manager's office, has taken on this role specifically to the question of our human resources building, which is up on North 2nd Avenue, an interesting building. And as we've looked at our space and what we have available, there's some options here we want to talk to you about, not for action today, but just for your feedback. And then we would come back next month with further information. Tony?
Yes, thank you, Ed, and good morning, Chairman Gates and subcommittee members. Over the summer, we conducted a citywide office space study, and we're here today to talk with you about those results. With me are Chris Mackey from CED and also Mary Vivian Withrow from the Finance Department real estate area. Also in the audience are the facilities folks from Public Works. They've been extremely helpful in this process. So as you are aware, we have about 3,000 fewer positions in the city, and we wanted to take a look citywide at office space to see if there were any opportunities for consolidation or for efficiencies. And what we discovered was the HR building, which has about 100 employees. We could take an opportunity there. They weren't utilizing the building facility currently, and we could relocate those employees over to the Calvin Good building where there is some space. Then we would take the HR building and put it on the market to sell it. A little bit of an overview of the HR building. As Ed mentioned, it's at the southeast corner of 2nd Avenue and Monroe in downtown. It's about 58,000 square feet. It's 6 floors with a basement. There is debt currently on the building of about $2.2 million, and we hope to pay that off with the sale of the building. We would expect about a $400,000 annual savings, and that's because we would no longer have electricity, maintenance, or other costs such as that associated with the building, and also a one-time savings of about $220,000. And that's because there's a citywide telephony project that this subcommittee has talked about in the past, but we would no longer need to include the HR building in the telephony project. I'll turn it over at this moment to Chris to talk a little bit about the interest and marketability of that building.
Chairman, council members, this is a fine building in a good location here in the downtown market, and we have just generally had conversations with potential buyers who we would go out to normally through an RFP process to kind of gauge the interest that there would be in this particular building. And there has been some interest expressed, some from a pure investment standpoint, some from a utilization standpoint for a company, and some from a more strategic standpoint. So I think there would be interest. There's some challenges with the building, the amount of parking that belongs with it. It's an older building. 0. Right.
So talk a little bit about the challenges of the building.
Absolutely. So on the challenges standpoint, as we've talked to people who would potentially be interested or just reviewed it from our own standpoint, it's a building that doesn't really fit the market well today. The market right now is demanding high clear heights on ground floors, open floor plans without column spacing. It's demanding kind of fresh, window-lined, newer buildings are what companies that are looking for that type of space would look for. And that building has none of the above. The biggest challenge it has is in parking. It has 0 parking spaces that belong to that building today. And the companies we're working with who would look for that type of space are anywhere between 5 and 7 per thousand in their parking. Our employees that are in it today park in a city parking structure. They wouldn't be giving up those spaces because they'd still be in city buildings, so we wouldn't have that availability of parking. So the greatest challenges that we see in that building, I've been in the building a number of times myself, looking at it just from a marketability standpoint, and it's going to struggle on the market. It's going to be a challenging building to market just from the time it was built, how it was built, column spacings and parking.
Councilman Waring?
First, should we be saying these things about the building we're trying to sell in a public meeting on television?
I don't think these are a mystery to any broker who would take 3 seconds to
I mean, I'm
look
all
at
for
a building would tell you
transparency,
that.
but this seems like it's taken it to the extreme. But all right, okay, be that as it may, tough building to sell. But it still costs us money to run this building.
It was back.
I was nice on the last one that she had. You'll reflect just an hour or so ago. I guess, you know, at some point we're going to get something for it. Somebody will want it. And that saves us money, right? A couple $100,000 a year.
Councilman, it's about $400,000 a year.
There we go.
Has there been an appraisal done on the property?
Chairman Gates and members of the subcommittee, no, we have not had the building appraised.
This is just really, really early in the process. We may, to this, come back after issuing a request and say it's not worth it. But we think it's important to at least raise it as a possibility and get the council's feedback.
We owe a couple million,
that.
right, on it. So, which I guess was a surprise, which maybe we can talk about that later. I'm not sure how that could be a surprise. But
well, the city purchased the building from the private sector at some point,
right,
and it had extensive remodeling
Yeah, we purchased purchased the building in 1991, and bonds were used to purchase it and for renovations. So those bonds, had they not been touched, would not be paid off until 2021. But if you'll recall, in 2011, a number of restructurings were done to help the general fund. These bonds were restructured in 2011, so the payoff is now 2028.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilman Nowakowski.
Now, who owns the parking garage underneath the building? Isn't there a parking garage underneath it?
Chairman, Councilman Nowakowski, it's owned by the 111 building owner immediately adjacent to the south of the property. So the two buildings actually kind of made up to the parking structure, and the 111 building ownership owns the parking structure that goes along with that.
So we own zero parking.
We own zero parking.
So in the future, if we decided to sell the building, knock it down, you can't really do that because we don't own the bottom piece of it, or the basement parking, right?
Chairman, Councilman Nowakowski, not being an engineer or an architect, but looking at it from a strategic point that I've seen done a number of times, there are ways they would shore up the parking structure underneath to make sure that demolition of the building on the top didn't affect the subterranean surface. So there are ways to accommodate that should the potential buyer determine in the future that the land is worth more than the building is.
Perfect.
Vice Mayor?
It's still a strategic piece of property as we continue to grow downtown. Lots of great things happening downtown, lots of excitement. I know that that's not what the message is today, but I don't think we sell this to the highest bidder necessarily. It's too strategic for that. We're just talking about, or I was just talking about the last item, or two items ago. It seems like one long item, but the investment part of it. We had this discussion with the Barrister building. We don't want to regret just giving up this piece of property. I think it makes sense, total sense, to do what we're talking about doing, what you're talking about doing, Chris, as far as moving out of that building, and now let's do something with it. But I think we have to have a vision here, and the downtown certainly does have a vision here, and what that piece of property and how it fits into that vision. It's a deeper discussion. What I would like to do is respectfully ask to see this item, even as an informational item, in the Downtown Aviation Redevelopment Subcommittee, which I have an opportunity to have the responsibility to chair, and to help carry that conversation with the colleagues there too, which we have two downtown council members who I'm sure are going to want to have a deeper discussion, but I'd like to see that item as well. If we can see that in DAR, I would appreciate it. I just think it's a bigger discussion. I think this is the right thing to do now. It's going to save us money now. We do have space elsewhere where we can move some of the responsibilities that we have, our city employees. But as we think of next steps of what to do with this building, we should have a vision here.
And I just have one more slide, if I may. One other thing that we discovered during our office space study is we learned about some leased space that city departments are leasing. One example is the Police Professional Standards Bureau leases space, the building that Chris was just talking about. It's just east of the HR building. It costs about $300,000 a year for the Professional Standards Bureau to lease that space. We have learned about other office space that is available in the city locations, and we're going to most likely recommend moving the Professional Standards Bureau over to the Historic City Hall, and that would save about $300,000 a year.
When is that lease up?
The lease expires about a year from now, so we're just in the early stages of that as well, but we'll come back to the subcommittee with more details, but there is potential for other savings out there as well. Yes, Councilman.
Tony, I just really want to thank you and your staff and for doing this study. Also, I think there's some opportunities where we can share maintenance crew and all kinds of opportunities. We have a park that's out there, our future park that's out on 99th and Buckeye, and we have a police station that's out there. We're going to probably have a parks crew that's out there. Why can't we start sharing resources between ourselves? I know that other cities have police stations, fire stations that are right next to each other. They use the same maintenance of vehicles and cleaning staff for their facilities. We should start looking at how we can use our staffs more wisely and resources more wisely. The other thing is looking at the opportunity to really maybe what would be knocking down that building and putting a public parking garage there wrapped with some apartments. I know that other cities are doing that in the downtown urban areas, and that's one of the things that we've been pushing on that master plan for downtown Phoenix, is trying to get those 5,000, or it's a goal that we set, 5,000 units of living downtown. So this might be a great opportunity for the city of Phoenix to actually bring some more housing and retail on the lower floors and actually create some parking. I know that we have the Orpheum lots that are struggling right now for parking right next door. I know that we have events at the Orpheum that sometimes our facility, our parking garages are being used by different theaters, and there's conflict sometimes on parking. But if we can maybe look at that option too and see if there's an incentive or so that we can create more parking and some housing downtown.
I agree with Councilman Nowakowski, and I think that's, what this RFP is all about, is finding what the best option is, and I think that could very well end up being the right one given the challenges of this building. But I really appreciate staff moving this forward. I'm happy to see this I just want to make sure we're looking everywhere that we are leasing property. If we're leasing space, we ought to get out of there as soon as we can. Do we have space in City Hall?
Yes.
We do.
So we have space in City Hall. We have space in the good, and I understand we have leases and things like that, but we really ought to be all over this. I mean, because we've been talking about this for a long time. Be on top of it and get people moved out of these spaces where we're leasing it and get them into the buildings that we own. So thank you for your work on this. Councilman Waring.
Thank you. Well, I guess to put it in a different perspective, I'm not sure how the 300,000 would be sliding under the radar if we've got open space in City Hall, much less our other buildings in our far-flung empire. So, I mean, this is getting out of that lease and moving those folks into City Hall or somewhere, or the Calvin Good building is infinitely easier for everybody than to actually go in and cut something, which may be the decisions that are made next year. So there should be ample incentive for the city manager and city staff to go find as much of this stuff as Councilman Gates said, because it's a lot harder to do it some other way. So I am a little surprised that this is only just coming to light. I was a little surprised. I mean, I think I had thought that we had paid off the building that we were talking about, the Human Resources building, but apparently not. I guess I don't know how there could be confusion about that, but apparently there was. So, but going forward, I hope this stuff is being scoured, because 300,000, that's a considerable expenditure every year. I mean, that's not some small, tiny thing that's hard to find. It's actually, quite a bit of money. So, so hopefully we'll have more of this stuff coming forward in the next couple of months.
So we actually have very little lease space. This is one of the few, and it's probably the biggest, that is now, because it's coming due, that's why we wanted to come to you and say, this thing is expiring in a year. We don't intend to renew it. We got space. We're going to bring them back. But Tony has done a thorough review with Mary of our leasing, and so we feel good that we've identified the ones here, but we'll continue to look everywhere we can.
Mr. Chair, it sounds like if it's a small list, I guess we'll be the ultimate judge whether it's actually small. Could we have the list?
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when the things expire, so we know what to expect.
That's a great request. Other comments? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion here to issue an RFP to look at the possibility of selling the HR building.
Mr. Chair, I think we're not ready actually to ask you that.
I'm sorry.
I think we posted for possible action, but I think we want to take this feedback and come back next month.
Yeah.
Chris is going to spend some more time kind of surveying the landscape, and we would intend to do this with a request next month. And we would also, that would give us an opportunity, if it's okay, to go to the DAR subcommittee, which happens a little bit before that, and we go to them for information.
Sorry, I got a little too eager here. That's fine.
And also to look at the possibility of housing with the public parking in there if we actually demolish it.
All this feedback has been really helpful, and it'll help us now as we kind of figure out what the next step would be.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Unless we have any other comments on that, we'll move to item number 9, City Manager's Lien Team.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an item we've been looking at. Mario Paniagua has agreed to take this on with Melissa Swinhagen from the Public Transit Department. They'll talk to you a little bit about it. I do just want to emphasize up front, the point of a lean team is not to eliminate jobs. The point is to eliminate processes that make our employees want to pull their hair out. We've done a lot of work to find efficiencies, over $100 million, and we're sort of through, I think, the easy group. This is now the stuff that makes residents' life better, internally our employees feel better, and makes our processes better. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mario.
Thank you, Ed, and Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee. Very enthusiastic to be here along with Melissa Swinhagen to talk about the city's lean team and the city manager's vision here for what we're about to begin doing. The word lean can conjure up all sorts of images about what that means, and just want to assure you that we're not here to create any new fad diets. We're not talking about Atkins or paleo. No new fad fitness programs. Some of you may remember the Thigh Master or Richard Simmons sweating to the oldies. We're not going to do that, but Fit Phoenix might want to take a look at
you
that.
actually could have gotten Councilman Waring with the sweating with the oldies.
With the Richard Simmons.
80s reference. Yeah. He likes those. Yeah.
So the question is, what are we doing then? And so although we're not talking about personal fitness programs, we are going to be looking at the fitness of the organization of the City of Phoenix as a whole. The reality is, as Ed mentioned, there have been several cuts. We're down to 3,000 employees. If you look at our employees to residents ratio, it's lower than it was in 1970-71 fiscal year. So it's not about, our primary goal here is not about making cuts to positions. It's about looking at our processes and making sure these processes are productive, are useful for the very things that the council is asking us to do. And with the resources that we're giving to do that, are we maximizing that? Are we getting the most out of it? And is the focus on our customers, on our citizens of Phoenix? And that's really what the goal of the Lean team is about. Lean Six Sigma is actually a combination of two approaches to looking at processes. Lean started in the 1970s with Toyota. Six Sigma was a separate approach that Motorola used beginning in the 1980s. And they focused on different aspects of process improvement, like consistency and reduction of errors. And their focus was on manufacturing and eliminating waste. Well, ever since then, these concepts have been applied in many private organizations to much more than just manufacturing. And also, in recent times, Lean and Six Sigma have been combined as approaches to take the best elements of both and apply them to different private organizations. Many different private organizations have used these. Public organizations are beginning to use these, and this is where we are going with the Lean team. So it's about process improvement and making the city better for our residents. And what we're talking about in our approach is to bring in a team of city staff. So it's going to be identifying a lot of really good and smart and bright people throughout our organization that are willing to take on this as an additional assignment to their work. So it's really an investment in our organization. The training that we're going to provide means that we're going to have 20 to 25 people in our organization that are certified in Lean Six Sigma concepts. And what we're going to do is send those people out to various departments and looking at internal processes and where we can improve those, streamline those, make them more productive and better for our customers. The approach is going to be to bring in a consultant to get those people trained and certified, and here to talk about more about how that's going to work is Melissa Swinhagen.
Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee, I have the remaining 27 slides for you today. Just kidding, just 3. So there are some examples of some successes from government agencies around the country where they have decided to implement Lean or Six Sigma methodologies. And one of those examples is Lane County, Oregon. They decided to look at their accident rate with their fleet. And what they found is that they had not aligned their regulatory requirements with the inspections that they were conducting for their fleet. So they aligned those and actually made some huge improvements in safety for their own team that was driving those vehicles. Another example is City of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they were looking at one of our favorite topics, which is potholes. They were unhappy with the amount of time it took for them to fix their potholes. They were taking several days, and what they did after they studied, they found that they were not aligning their teams that were fixing the potholes with reaction to weather. So something as simple as aligning the teams with responding to weather events helped them cut down their pothole fixing time to, believe it or not, a few hours. Another example of Lean Six Sigma being effective in a government agency is Hartford, Connecticut. They were looking at their tax collections, and they were taking several days to deposit their collections, and that they were losing out on a lot of interest. So they looked at how they could improve that process, cut down on the steps, and they were able to deposit their money quicker and gain more interest from that. The last example is Washington State Department of Licensing. So people were unhappy with the amount of time it took to renew their driver's license. I think we're okay in Arizona in that respect, but what they did in Washington State is talk to people who are waiting for their driver's license renewal. It took many hours, and they were able to cut their time down by 50%. So that was very effective in these locations, and it's something that we're hoping to do as well. So this is a little Wednesday morning humor. RFPs are fun for everybody, but that would be our next step. We're asking for your thoughts and approval for putting an RFP out on the street. I thought this was a perfect image I found online. We would like to put an RFP to work with, for training purposes, an agency, whether it is an educational institution, a private company. There are all kinds of firms that do this type of training. And what we're going to be looking for is someone who can tailor it to Phoenix. So it doesn't matter who it is. We want the best person. We want the best agency, whether it's a government agency, whether it's a private company. We're looking for the best firm to help us out and train our city staff so that we're equipped to move and look at these processes. And finally, the time is now. We are hoping to put this RFP out on the street quickly. We know you are dying for us to get this out on the street. We're hoping the next couple weeks. And if that happens, then we would shortly be looking at the proposals from all those who submit. We would be then working with the trainer to train city staff and move forward on projects that would help out the city. And that's it.
Chairman Gates, appreciate the time today to explain what we're doing with Lean, and we are also asking for approval from this subcommittee to recommend moving forward with the RFP for the training.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I actually have a card here. Would my colleagues mind if we hear from the speaker first? Marshall Pimental, sir, if you want to join us down here at the microphone.
Good morning, council members, city manager, and staff. Six Sigma was something that I dealt with when I was an employee over at Motorola. So I do have firsthand knowledge of this approach. First, let me say that Motorola instituted this approach to become more streamlined and competitive. Though the amount of money and effort to put this approach of efficiencies in place, the overall results proved otherwise. I'm a perfect example. As an employee of Motorola, the computer group, I'm now here working with the city of Phoenix. Through attrition, the loss of certain components of Motorola, it is no longer the huge place that it used to be, as we're all aware. My mother retired from the place. I thought it was a good place to work, and now I'm here at the city of Phoenix because they've reduced down through efficiencies and everything else to try to become that better competitive employer. Motorola is no longer the electronics powerhouse it built itself up to be. They had become a shell and had to sell off most of their businesses. Their microprocessing plant at 52nd Street was sold to ON Semiconductor. Their military plant was sold to General Dynamics, and the computer group and radio shops were outsourced and diminished. Most of the decisions of their business model was based on Six Sigma, but Motorola pursued this approach to focus more attention on their cell phone business. But even that decision and use of the Six Sigma approach has put them at a disadvantage with their competition, and they are no longer in the competitive field, much less the race. First off, Six Sigma is based mainly on math and statistics without utilizing real-world data. Efficiency experts crunch numbers all day in an office and forget that the elements that they are not accustomed to affect the performance of those actually doing the job. The concerns, thoughts, and ideas of the workers are never taken into consideration and thus hinders progress. I'll finish up quickly.
Yeah, if you just kind of wrap up.
The Efficiency Committee has saved over $103 million. Not taking the advice of the consultants has cost the city money, such as the case with the Petroli versus City of Phoenix. The input, discussions, and meetings and feedback to improve efficiencies is already taking place. The direction to cut to the bone has taken its toll on workplace improvements. Years of historical knowledge and experience has been lost through attrition. Staffing levels are at an all-time low and is hindering work performance, safety, and best practices. A private sector approach such as Six Sigma and more consultation isn't needed. We already know what's wrong. We provide a service to the community. We don't build or manufacture a product. So I'm asking this team to use caution in its approach. Let's retain our 93% approval rating by becoming a competitive employer who hires employees to do the work, not just talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments from my colleagues on this item? Councilor Nowakowski.
Do we have an idea how much this would cost?
We don't have any proposals back that we've seen on this exactly, but we do expect. I think we did have an initial quote from Arizona.
About 3,000 or 2 or 3. Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee, just in looking at what is initially available online from many different companies, and in looking at just the small amount of information that some organizations provide on their training, it could be somewhere maybe $2,500, $3,500 per person who is trained for the city of Phoenix. But that is just a guesstimate based on what is available online when I look at different agencies that provide this kind of online and in-person training.
Councilor Nowakowski.
The prior slide, I think you had some other cities that were actually using this process. Have you contacted them to see how much the service was, or how much it cost those cities to actually implement that program?
Chairman Gates, Councilmember Nowakowski, I have not contacted those cities yet, but if we were moving forward with the RFP, I would like to move forward and ask other government agencies what they paid for their services, if they're willing to provide that information.
Mr. Chairman, I'd feel really comfortable having a ballpark figure of what we're voting on, because I would hate to approve an RFP process not knowing how much it could actually cost us, and having individuals go out there and do all kinds of work and putting a process together for us. And if it's out of our ballpark range, I don't think I think we should have some type of numbers before even proceeding with the RFP.
Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee, one of the things that we would look to do, because this is actually building development and training for our employees that are part of this team, is to use existing benefits that are available to employees, so that are for the purpose of employee development. So it uses those benefits that they're already getting to tap into that, as well as any additional resources that might be needed. And then the other thing that we can do is, once the proposals are back and we're moving forward with those, we can share with the subcommittee definitely what we're looking at in terms of a cost as we move forward. But as Melissa said, at this point, if we're talking about $2,500 to $3,000 per employee on the training on average, we're looking at about $50,000 to $60,000 in cost, and that would be a ballpark range.
Other comments or questions?
And just to make clear, this is not authorizing the staff to spend any money. That would come after we have any results back, or we would make a recommendation. This is simply would be an authorization to have people give us their proposals. So you're not authorizing us to spend a dime with this recommendation.
If there aren't any other comments, I would just say I've had personal experience at Ping where Lean has been and Six Sigma have been used very effectively and actually position the company for strength. So, I mean, Motorola, I appreciate that comment, but I think there's probably some other things involved too in what happened there, and I think it is a very well recognized successful approach that has been used in the private sector, and I appreciate the comments both from the city manager and from Mario that this is not about the process. If we were to go forward with it, it's not about reducing positions at all. It's about making the process better, and we have a lot of processes in this organization, sixth largest city in the country, and I think we could benefit as long as we recognize, we could end up saving money from it, but number one is about providing better services and in a more efficient way. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve moving forward with the RFP.
Move to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right.
Yes. If I can just, go a few items ago, again, we're talking about best practices, our city employees. I just want to be sure that our employees are in the loop on this. No one knows their jobs better, frankly, and I would hope you would agree with that. Mm-hmm. No one knows their job better. They're doing it every day. They're thinking of ways to get better at it. We've been able to save more than $100 million, and those ideas are coming directly from our employees and trying to figure out best practices. So I want to be sure that that's happening as well.
Vice Mayor, that's exactly the point. The Lean team are city employees, and the people they talk to about processes are the people who are frustrated by the employees, by the process itself, which are the employees who have to do these things. And it's the employees who know, I don't know why I'm doing these 6 steps, but my boss tells me I have to. When you ask them, they say steps 2 through 4 are ridiculous, and then this team helps them throw them out. So absolutely, the employee is the center of this as well as the customer.
Great, thank you.
And by the way, I want to thank the city manager for not doing this as a single source, but moving forward with an RFP. I think that's the right way to handle this, so I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We are going to continue item number 11 to our next meeting of the subcommittee. So our last item for action here is item 10, review collection agency and lien cost recovery information.
Our Assistant Finance Director, Sandy Schilling, will walk us quickly through this. This was an item that was at the last council meeting before the summer break. This subcommittee reviewed it before, went to the council, they asked for more information, so we withdrew it to come back here. And so Denise Olson, our CFO, and Sandy Schilling, our Assistant CFO, will walk us through this quickly.
Good morning. Oh. Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee. Let me get my little flipper here. What I wanted to do first is just go quickly over the activities that we had talked about in April of what happens in our collections process. First off, as an account becomes delinquent, and we have automated past due letters and statements that occur in every system that we have. We also have outbound calling from internal staff. We also have a contract of a vendor that makes outbound calls for us. We also have generous payment plans that we try to set up with our customers, anybody that is delinquent. As one of the final steps, we have final demand letters. What this is a letter that gives the customer 10 days to pay before we send them to a collection agency. Before we send to collection agency, on some of the different types of debt that we have, we file liens. And if we don't file the liens, and in case we do, then the next step is to assign those accounts to the collection agency or to a legal firm. In July, we went to City Council to get approval to update City Code Chapter 2, Article 1. This would allow for the recovery of our lien fees and also allow for the collection agency costs to be recovered from the debtor. As City Manager said, the council did request additional information. I wanted to give you some additional clarification on what we're talking about here. So the updates to the city code would affect the municipal services bill, which is water, sewer, solid waste. Also the transaction or TPT tax that we have, the fire emergency transportation services, and general accounts receivable, including neighborhood services, blight liens, and also things like damages. This does not affect the municipal courts or the judicial system fees in any way. As a side note, the municipal courts has, since the 1990s, had a collection agency recovery system in place. So what we focus on for our collections efforts at the city is any new debt, accounts that have recently become past due. There are most usually our active customers, so we want to make sure that we focus on them. We also look at accounts that have high balances to make sure that we're getting, trying to get return for our money. Some of the things that we do as in that the research of those bad debt accounts is we find that people have died. We find that people have filed for bankruptcy. In those accounts, what we do is we tag them in our systems, and we set them aside. We don't look at those accounts anymore, and the collections workflow is completely stopped for those types of accounts. We also set aside any minimal balances that are not economically feasible for us to pursue, and any really aged debt, we set that aside also. So let's talk about what is bad debt is from a city perspective. So from a city perspective, one of the issues that came up at the council meeting was that we do carry an accumulated balance in our systems, in our accounts receivable systems. There could be accounts that are 80 years old, the city's from the very beginning of city debt. By law, we cannot gift any amounts. So think of, from a city perspective, what we have in our accounts receivable system is for record keeping. It is because we can't gift. We have to keep that information in our system. But from an accounting perspective, we do have an annual write-off of debt, an expense that happens every year for bad debt accounts. As we find accounts are bankrupt or people have passed away, we do expense those amounts in our financial system. That's the way any other business does it. We also have, in our accounts receivable that are pending, not due yet, we also have an allowance for doubtful accounts that we have set up each year. And again, this is the same way that any other for-profit business handles their bad debt. So another question that came up at the council in July was who's going to be affected by this cost recovery? Who's going to feel the impact if we have these costs recovered from the debtors? So as you can see, for the municipal services bill, most of the people that are past due are individuals. For TPT, it's 100% businesses. For the emergency transportation services, it's 100% individuals. There are insurance billings that occur. Those insurance billings happen, and this is the remaining amount that's left for the payment, like people's copays. And for general accounts receivable, about 69% of those are individuals, and the rest of the 31% has to do with business. So let's talk about the distribution. You can't see it very well. So I hope you can see it. Can you see it at all, the dots on the map? So there is a city map in front of you, and what we're looking at now is the delinquent water bills. One of the concerns was that maybe the lower income areas were being hit more with the debt, and that if we did implement a recovery, that amount would hurt those individuals even more. What you can see from this map is that the distribution of the water bills, the delinquent water bills, is throughout the entire city.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councilman Waring.
I left my opera glasses at home, but I can kind of see a little bit of that. Is that
Am I sitting next to Bob Stump?
Well, I don't know. I'm cultured. I'm a little cultured. But I think I can make out the dots. I mean, is that all the delinquent water bills in the city?
That's correct.
How many are on there?
There's 24,000 on here.
There's 24,000 red dots.
There's 24,000, no. What, the colors, I don't know if.
I'm sorry,
James
see, I
has some maps
can't
here.
see the ledger. I'm sorry.
The colors represent the amount of the debt. So as.
Oh, I see. So there's a lot of other colors that there's no way you can
That's
get it. Okay,
correct.
all right.
That's correct. So what we
even
did
on
was
this?
we made the sizes of the dots represent the amount of the.
Sorry, thank you. No, I get it now that there's a lot of dots. I can only see the red on that screen. Oh, do you guys want to? Oh.
So for
Use some
delinquent
nice pastels,
taxes,
but it's hard.
you can see that the distribution is the same. The delinquent TPT is throughout the entire city. There's businesses throughout the entire city that are delinquent. It doesn't matter what region they're in. And there you go, Councilman Waring, you can really see the dots now. So this is for the fire emergency transportation services. And the reason that there are so many red dots on here is because of the size of the debt. So their average bill is about $800. That's why you see all of the red. But you can see that it's distributed everywhere. It's not regional. Okay.
Well, how does one accumulate? So, get my own glasses here. That. So it looks like the top water balance due one is $57,806.
That's
I mean, I
correct.
assume you didn't just pick that. That seems like the highest
You
in
just
part of the
picked
range.
it.
Okay.
That's correct.
So how does one accumulate? How does one get water until that point? Is that a really large business that uses an enormous amount of water and then went bankrupt
Chairman
immediately?
Gates, members of the subcommittee, Councilman Waring, yes, that's
exactly okay.
There are businesses that are represented in those red dots. There's also, we've supplied water to Paradise Valley, the town of Paradise Valley. There are customers, because they only get sewer, we've lost our leverage on the water accounts as far as being able to turn someone off, so they don't pay. So you'll see a couple of red dots.
People have
there.
homes in Paradise Valley and they don't pay the water bill.
They may pay their water bill because that's provided by Paradise Valley. We provide sewer. They don't pay their sewer.
Or they don't pay the sewer, excuse me, sorry, I had it reversed. Because I can see the $500 to $1,000 ones. I mean, we have a property and we use water, and so I sort of know kind of what water bills are. But you know, when I start looking at these higher ones, are they all businesses? I mean, it would take years and years to get up to a $5,000 bill if you have just a normal home.
Right. They could be businesses. They could be apartment complexes.
Oh, apartment complexes. All right. Okay. At what point do you? Well, I'll save that for an offline question. I know it's getting late.
Okay.
You're tired of me. So
You're getting tired.
I'm not getting tired. You guys are getting tired of me. I know how that goes. So.
Okay. So one of the things we also wanted to show you is what are the other 20 largest cities doing in the United States? As you can see, I have Phoenix highlighted there. 15 of the 20 largest cities do use outside collection agencies for collections on the same type of services that we're providing. 14 of the 20, with Phoenix being the exception of the 15 that I was talking about using agencies, actually recover the cost from the customer. So Phoenix is the only city that, of the largest cities, that use collection agencies but eat the costs. So what we're recommending for cost-saving solutions is to charge back the delinquent customers the cost of filing the liens. This past year, we recorded over 1,100 liens for the city worth about $5.7 million. A number of liens that we recovered was about 1,300, and we got $1.5 million back from that investment. So the fees that we charge are $78 for a balance for a lien that's up to $10,000, $302 for balances over the $10,000 mark. Conservatively, we could bring back $62,000 annually of these fees. The second recommendation is to charge back.
Can we go back to the last slide?
Absolutely.
So does that mean a $78 balance you would charge $78, or a $50 balance you would charge $78?
I wouldn't waste my time on a $50 lien.
Okay, so what are we talking about? What would be the lowest number for a lien?
Probably the lowest that we have usually for taxes is probably about $500.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the second recommendation is to add the contractor percentages onto the debt and to recover the additional money that the collection agencies could have brought back to us. Last year, the agencies gave back to us about $1 million. We paid about $300,000 for that service. So that $300,000 we could have recovered if the debt would have been added back onto the debtor themselves.
Okay, so just to clarify then, in other words, what you're saying is it costs us money to track this money down.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
You're asking us to give you the ability to go ahead and charge the people that you had to track down the costs that it costs them. It costs you to track them down.
Right.
Right?
That's correct.
We're not talking about anything other than that.
That's all we're asking for.
And the other thing that I think is important that goes back to our first slides is this doesn't happen, like we don't go from zero to this in one day. There are multiple opportunities along the way for people to have ways to pay their bills, payment plans, contacts. There are steps that we take. We don't just go there quickly. If we get to this point, someone has really ignored all the work that our staff have done to try to get them into paying what they owe. And in the case of sales tax, particularly, they've already collected it from the customer.
Right.
They have the money somewhere, somehow. So, and we've talked about that in the subcommittee before.
Just before Councilor Nowakowski goes, so in other words, if we don't charge these folks the costs of collection, that means the taxpayers are paying these collection costs.
That's
right?
correct.
So that's our choice. Either we have the taxpayers do it, or we have the people who are forcing us to have to track them down pay for it.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, Councilor Nowakowski.
I think it's great. I think that in the previous slides, you talked about 4 contacts, either through letters or calls or trying to contact that individual before sending them to collections, and then after collections, there's actually a lien on their property or on themselves, right? Then the other thing that I was looking into is that I'd like to have a report outside this committee, unless my colleagues would like to have it, on our water bill. What's our process? If you don't pay 1 month, what happens? Or if it's
delinquent process?
Do we wait 60 days, 90 days, or 120 days? And if there's other resources out there for individuals that are maybe somebody lost their job, is there services that we provide to help them through that hump in their lives, right?
We do have Project Assist that's in, I think it's through the housing department. And taxpayers can donate money on their water bill, and that money is specifically used for that. All the citizens have to do is contact our Human Services department,
Right.
and apply for that assistance.
And then the other thing is I've been seeing a lot more yard sales, farmer markets, park and swaps going up, and everything is done with cash. So I like to really look into how do we get our tax dollars from that, or because I'm not sure if they're being reported or if there's some type of a task force that we have that can actually go out there, and if our people can actually call and report that in, and we can follow through with that. Because I'm seeing a lot of that happening in the recent years.
Yeah, that's a great point. Other questions or comments on this item?
Okay, last slide.
Oh.
So we request that the subcommittee affirm their decision that you made last April, and we would like to send this back to council on September 30th.
Okay, all right. Any other comments, or at this time I would entertain a motion kind of reaffirming what this subcommittee already approved. But I think there were some good clarifications here, because honestly I think we got a little far afield at the council level, and I think you clarified some what we're not talking about here.
Perfect.
Move to validate our previous.
All right, that's a new kind of motion. I haven't heard it before. And a second. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for that clarification. And then, like I mentioned previously, we're going to continue item 11. So, I'm sorry. Well, we have 2 11s here, I just noticed, or at least on mine. But anyway, we'll now move to the second number 11, which is called to the public. And for call to the public, I have one card here for Jason Stokes. Mr. Stokes. We do have 2 minutes for this.
Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee. I just wanted to provide a little clarification to a question that was came up a little earlier. It was on item 6 regarding the administration of the COBRA plan. Some of the members of the subcommittee had questions regarding if the employee groups had any involvement. My understanding, I wasn't able to speak to it at that particular moment, but my understanding was a 4-person panel reviewed the RFPs. One of those people was a labor representative. The recommendation from that panel never went before the Healthcare Task Force and never went before the Healthcare Trust Board. And so I just wanted to make sure that you received the correct information. We clarified that point, that I would say that the employee groups really did not have the opportunity to weigh in on that decision. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes, and I'm sure that the city manager will address that as we move forward and this item goes to full council. Thank you. We do not have, that's the only card we have for call to the public, which takes us to future agenda items. And we do have a very full list here of future agenda items. I think this list has been provided to all my colleagues. Any additional items? I think there were a couple that were raised today during the meeting about some future agenda items, but any additional items that my colleagues would like to see addressed?
You know, one of the things one of the importances of my colleagues and myself is public safety. Is there a way to figure out a way to generate funds for police officers? If it's either through some of our fines that we have at the court system, if some of that can be reimbursed back to some of the cost to process a criminal or individual, or even with the whole towing contracts that we have. Is there other cities or best practices where there's a return on back to the police department on towing cars, and if there's a possibility of making up some revenue so there's some kind of a revenue stream, sort of like how the firefighters have the ambulance service, that there's a fee to that. Is there somehow that we can actually put a fee to some of those tickets or even some of the services of maybe towing or other services that police officers provide, that if there's a cost that we can put behind it?
Yep, thank you, Councilman. I think that might, I mean, obviously might fall under the purview of your subcommittee, but then also the finance piece of this committee as well. Right. So thank you. We'll look at that for future item. Anything else? All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
I tell you, these are instantaneous decisions you have to make, and it really is life or death. Now from the tactical village, we're actually going to go to the shooting range and actually shoot real guns. Joshua, we just went through this very interesting scenarios all about decision making. It's the first time I haven't actually held a weapon before. Walk us through, I mean, you have communications number one and is key. Obviously, number one is you have to assess the situation, because something that you thought maybe it's not really what it is.
Oh yeah, sure. Oftentimes we'll get calls, and we really have to evaluate and get as much information as we can while we're en route to the call. But the officers go with the approach, and they keep an open mind, because sometimes we're not always getting all the information we need. So the officers will go there and they'll assess what's going on, and then they'll deal with it from there, like you just saw inside. Yep.
And I can tell you, it's a very scary situation. It's the first time I actually haven't held a weapon like that. So decision making is instantaneously. When somebody is pointing a gun at you, you have to think very quickly.
Yeah, it's almost kind of a reactionary type skill, and that's why this training is important, and repetition in the training is really important too, because there's not a lot of time to make these decisions, and they are life and death decisions at some points. So this is a really good tool to help